JSB Talks Digital.
Hello and welcome to JSB Talks Digital, the podcast for marketers, digital change champions, and those of you bringing your skills into the digital age. I'm Joanne Sweeney-Burke, and this podcast is brought to you by Digital Training Institute. In this episode, I explore how news is being disrupted by social media. In social media news, Facebook introduces live audio for voice-only broadcasts, GIFs in Facebook comments, and Facebook page video covers. I interviewed Dr. Eileen Culloty, a postdoctoral researcher at the DCU FuJo Institute, where she works on projects about media coverage of climate change, misinformation, and digital literacy. In shoutouts, 3 news websites disrupting news. Ask JSB, My Community Ask, and I Respond. In JSB's column, I look at how news has been disrupted by social media and find out what tool will amplify your news on Facebook.
Social media news.
Facebook has announced the rollout of live audio for voice-only broadcasts. As a podcaster, this is like manna from heaven for me. Quite simply, I will be able to broadcast my voice to any subscriber who may be tuning in. Just like live video, users will be able to stream their audio straight to their followers' news feeds and receive live feedback such as Q&A. Android users will be able to continue listening while in other apps or with a locked screen. Those of us on iOS can continue to hear the broadcasts while exploring about in the Facebook app. Facebook will continue testing this new feature with partners such as BBC World Service and HarperCollins. It's expected the wider rollout to the rest of us will be sometime early next year. To mark the 30th anniversary of the GIF format, Facebook has introduced GIFs in comments, and I absolutely love it. Facebook also announced that almost 13 billion GIFs were sent on Messenger over the past year, with 400 million GIFs sent just on one day on New Year's Day 2017. Have you noticed Facebook page video covers? Well, lots of users have over the past week. Facebook has said, we recently started testing the ability on desktop to upload a video as the page cover. Once a cover video has been created, video will render when people visit the page. By making cover video available, we want to help you create more engaging interactions and drive more rich experiences for your audience by letting you spotlight your creative content in one of the most prominent spaces, your page cover. So the feature is still in early testing, but they said that they expect to roll it out more widely very soon.
Interview.
In this show, I interviewed Dr. Eileen Culloty, a postdoctoral researcher at the Dublin City University FuJo Institute. Eileen works on projects about media coverage of climate change, misinformation, and digital literacy. The DCU Institute for Future Media and Journalism is an interdisciplinary initiative that aims to advance the social and democratic values of journalism in the digital age. Eileen, you're very welcome to JSB Talks Digital. Thanks for joining me on the show.
Thank you.
So first of all, in the context of your work, which is absolutely fascinating, and I think a new discipline, how do you think social media has impacted journalism as we know it?
Well, social media has changed the way journalists work, how they gather information, find stories and deliver stories. But more importantly, social media has transformed the way the public consume and engage with news. So on our social media feeds, news is interspersed with everything from cute cat videos to wedding announcements. And our exposure to news is often dependent upon our peers sharing it. So it's a very different scenario from the days of mass media, when news was watched or read as a discrete package and at a particular time. But the whole culture of how we consume news is changed.
Do you think that social news has made a heavy indent, whether positive or negative, into traditional research news? So, for example, we read news stories based on how users interact with them by voting, liking, commenting, or sharing. We saw an example of that where in the recent UK election, social media users were asked to give a like for Jeremy Corbyn or a heart for Theresa May in the 48 hours before the elections.
Well, social media certainly creates an incentive for clickbait and attention-grabbing simplifications. And that's because the online environment operates an attention economy. There's just simply so much content and information out there, and all the news outlets are competing for that attention. And some rely on this clickbait more heavily than others, primarily because they need revenue. They need to get audiences to come to them. But interestingly, in the last few years, there's been a growing move towards long reads and well-researched content. So the London Times, for example, has abandoned breaking news altogether and just concentrates on offering analysis. So it seems that the news outlets that have paywalls that are a bit more prestigious and want to encourage prescriptions, they're moving away from that type of clickbait or liking content.
That's really interesting. I recently interviewed Dr. David Staniloff from the Transatlantic Academy in Germany, and he told me that there are now 4 PR practitioners for every 1 journalist in the United States, and he believed that that was one reason why the world of journalism was being disrupted and that news could be controlled to a certain extent on social media. Do you have any views on that?
Well, public relations and journalism have historically had a mutually dependent and very tricky relationship. The PR companies relied heavily on the news media to get their messages out there, and the news media relied on PR to give them copy to fill up space. And now that the news media companies, they're reduced revenues and reduced resources, so in a way they're even more reliant on getting copy from PR and then just reprinting it, often without checking it. But on the other side, the PR companies are now less reliant on journalists. They can go directly to social media and talk directly to their target audiences. And there's some interesting examples of this in sports, where you see that football clubs bypass journalists altogether. They go directly to talk to their fans on social media and encourage them to come to their website so they can remain much more tightly in control of their PR and their brand reputation. There's certainly a lot of tension there, but the news media would seem to be the weaker of the two.
It's almost like role reversal in the digital age, isn't it? So what role does journalism play in protecting the truth and mitigating against fake news, which was the big social media news development, if you like, in 2016?
Well, the core skills of investigative journalism are vital to democratic accountability, and I think that will continue. And in recent years, a lot of news outlets have engaged in a lot more fact-checking initiatives or verification initiatives, but they'll make a point of responding to content that's online by fact-checking it. But during the Brexit referendums, one of the biggest criticism of the BBC was that they failed to fact-check and interrogate claims. So it seems that a lot of the more prestigious news media are now trying to avoid those criticisms by actively fact-checking claims that are out there. In terms of fake news, though, fact-checking every crazy story that appears online isn't necessarily a good idea. For one thing, it can give much broader publicity to an idea that would remain on the fringe. And for another thing, it's not certain that fact-checking will change the minds of the people who are most likely to believe a fake story. So good investigative journalism is important on the one hand, but it's not necessarily going to counteract fake news.
You spoke about how it was now possible, for example, sports clubs to bypass sports journalists and go straight to the fans. I'm also thinking about this in the context of public policy, policing and politics, and how these organisations can amplify public interest news by bypassing and filtering out traditional media. However, the other side of that is that you're up against the citizen journalist and hate campaigning. Where is the balance there?
Right, we're currently actually doing a project with colleagues in Australia on how politicians bypass the news media and go straight to the public. What we actually find in Ireland, at least, is that they don't always want to bypass the news media, that the journalists can often be better placed to bring a message to the public at large, particularly television news. But then more subtle messages can be kind of narrowcast online. This is a feature of the British general election as well, where the main campaigns were visible, but it wasn't clear at all what messages were being targeted on Facebook to very particular groups. There's no way of finding out what those are unless you're in one of those groups. So it is possible that we'll have a lot more narrow campaigning that the rest of us are not aware of.
The 2017 Edelman Trust Barometer shows the largest ever drop in trust across the institutions of government, business, media and NGOs. Trust in the media is also at an all-time low at 43% across 17 countries. Do you think that social media has in any way has negatively affected public confidence and also confidence in our public services?
It's part of it, but it's not the cause, because the trust in news media has been declining for decades. So it precedes social media, this sharp decline in trust, and it does seem to be related to a broader loss in faith of public institutions. But social media certainly exasperates the trend. On the kind of polarization that you can find on social media, or the fact that you can just be very selective about what you engage with, that would seem to amplify distrust. For example, one of the most frequently trending hashtags in Ireland seems to be RTE bias. And if you look at all the various groups that use this hashtag, it seems that this part of the polarization is to kind of latch on to RTE is biased.
Finally, Eileen, let's talk about journalists and their digital skills. We know there was a huge underinvestment in the journalism industry, like all industries, I guess, during the recession. But do they need to play catch up to protect truth in the news online?
Well, I think some of the leading journalism outlets already are, and there's some very interesting newer journalism outlets like Al Jazeera Plus or BuzzFeed, where they're very innovative in the way they combine high-quality investigative journalism with really good digital presentation. And most journalists now are not just writers anymore. They create video, they create audio, and really push forward this kind of multimedia storytelling.
Dr. Eileen Culloty from the Institute for Future Media and Journalism at DCU. Thank you so much for joining me on the show, and I definitely will be following your research with great interest. If you want to find out more about their work, please log on to fujomedia.eu.
Shoutouts.
In this part of the show, I give shout-outs to brands, organisations or individuals whose work online is remarkable and worth talking about. In this week's show, I'm giving a nod to 3 news websites that are disrupting journalism as we know it. They have also cracked the discipline of social news.
1.
BuzzFeed describes itself as the first true social news organisation, publishing everything from viral cat videos to in-depth analysis of US politics. Originating in the US, it also has a UK-based website. Founded in 2006 as a viral lab focusing on tracking viral content, it is hugely successful. So why is it so successful? Investor Kaz Lazarou of Buddy Media described BuzzFeed as building the defining media company for the social age. Its mix of humorous lists, celebrity gossip, picture stories and breaking news has captured a booming demand for material to share with friends. We are living in the sharing age after all. In late 2011, Ben Smith of Politico was hired as editor-in-chief to expand the site into serious journalism, long form and reportage. And speaking of serious news, BuzzFeed earned its first finalist in the prestigious Pulitzer Prize earlier this year.
2.
The Huffington Post is an American news and opinion website that has both localised and international editions. Founded in 2005, it was acquired by AOL 6 years later for $315 million, and it made one of its original founders, Arianna Huffington, editor-in-chief. The Huffington Post was ranked number 1 of the 15 most popular political sites list by eBiz MBA Rank, which bases its list on each site's Alexa Global Traffic Rank and US traffic rank from both Compete and Quantcast. In 2012, the Huffington Post became the first commercially run US digital media enterprise to win a Pulitzer Prize.
3.
Probably the most successful traditional media outlet to go online, Mail Online, also known as dailymail.co.uk, is the website of the Daily Mail newspaper. Launched in 2003, Mail Online was made into a separately managed site in 2006 under the editorship of Martin Clark. It is now the most visited English language newspaper website in the world, with around 15 million daily website visitors. It truly has fully embraced the digital age. The Mail's biggest traffic day was the 11th of January 2017, when it registered 16.8 million unique browsers. That was the day that the death of musician David Bowie was announced. Ask JSB brings the voices of my listeners onto the podcast. So you have an opportunity to ask me a question, have it aired on the show, and I will respond. If you want to hear your voice on JSB Talks Digital, simply log on to digitaltraininginstitute.ie/askjsb.
Hi Joanne, Cleona Connolly, Press Officer with the EPP Group. When you speak about social media disrupting news, I think of the young people that are now mostly getting their news on social media. And we also hear talk of this filter bubble on major social networking sites. And my question for you is, how can we ensure that social media news is more truthful, verified and balanced? Because often it is one-sided or full of falsehoods. So how do we ensure that if young people are getting on social media now, that they're getting correct and balanced reports? Thank you.
Hi Cleona, great to hear from you on the show, and wow, what a question. I have to admit that I did take some time out over a cup of tea to think about that one. And you are absolutely correct. Social news is being consumed more and more by the I generation, so those born from the mid-1990s to the early 2000s. And they are mobile-first consumers. The Reuters Institute Digital News Report of 2016 actually revealed that more than a quarter of 18 to 24-year-olds say that social media are their main source of news, more than television, at 24%. And this is the first time that has ever happened. With this in mind, and to answer your question, I guess I ask myself, what should media outlets do to preserve the truth in news on social networks? So I have some thoughts on this. We certainly need to educate social media users about how to spot fake news, while also being able to identify verified news sites. Last year, the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland launched a new media literacy policy, setting out a range of skills to help people navigate new and emerging forms of media, including the skills to have the critical awareness to query an item of news. That was a really good development. Social networks, I believe, also have a huge part to play in preserving the integrity of news and fact. In a welcome move last month ahead of the UK general elections, Facebook took out full-page adverts in the main newspapers to advise people on how to spot fake news with their 10-point checklist. I've also seen some media outlets launch a fact-check series when a high-profile news story breaks. This is really useful and in fact much needed to filter out the hearsay from the truth. I also think that PR practitioners, press advisors and those involved in corporate communications have a part to play. A better understanding of how the internet works is important. It's no secret that fake news sites rank better than traditional news sites often because they understand the principles of search engine optimization, viral reach and clickbaiting much more intensely than many traditional comms professionals. It's time to take back the news reins, and all of us involved in the dissemination of news need to amplify that truth more widely by leveraging digital marketing and social media tactics. So that's my long-winded answer to your very important question. I hope you enjoyed it.
JSB's column.
In today's column, I look at how news has been disrupted by social media. Technology has dramatically reshaped how we consume news in the past decade. The smartphone revolution has transformed the media industry forever. And we've left behind a world where established news brands could rely on reaching large audiences and demand high advertising revenues. I've been working with the independent radio sector in Ireland recently on digital transformation. And it's safe to say that traditional media outlets are struggling to find their feet in the digital world, especially in terms of developing online revenue streams. The emergence of new media players, coupled with the growth of social networking, the introduction of smartphones and the evolution of online advertising have contributed to a media landscape that is changing at considerable speed. So, the arrival of social news. In 2016, the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism conducted global research into how the public is consuming news in the digital age. They found that across their entire sample, half, or 51%, say they use social media as a source of news each week. Around 1 in 10, 12%, say it is their main source, while Facebook is by far the most important network for finding, reading, watching, and sharing news. News and journalism has been disrupted in the digital age. Politicians no longer rely exclusively on the media to communicate their messages to the public. However, there is no doubt that news media play a vital role in protecting the integrity of truth in the news, and they are an important intersection with the public. They provide third-party affirmation of your views, your political actions, so they should not be ignored. The rise of fake news and echo chambers has caused some people to step back from online communications. However, I believe there is a responsibility on legislators, on PR practitioners, and other public sector and corporate communications workers to actually push out the truth. This is where online PR comes in. This is the other side of media. It's the marriage of traditional techniques with new technologies to help amplify news reach and also engagement. You should care about where your news lands on the internet, and media outlets should care about how the internet works. If you want to discuss how to amplify your news online, then get in touch. Simply drop me an email to joanne@digitaltraining.ie.
Social media tool of the week.
Facebook Live has transformed the world of news. I find myself watching news reports and breaking news on Facebook more and more. I also use Facebook Live to amplify my own news, and so the tool that saved my working week this week is BeLive.tv. I really like this tool because it provides more functionality and features than Facebook Live itself. BeLive.tv does not allow you to record anywhere else, however, so you will be broadcasting directly to Facebook. When you initially register, you will be asked for the text that will become the post on Facebook Live title to accompany your live stream. You will need to connect using your Facebook profile. This week they launched their pricing plans and you can now get a free 14-day trial. They also have really good tutorials on their Facebook page, so go check it out. Log on to BeLive.tv. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of JSB Talks Digital. To ensure you never miss an episode, make sure you subscribe on your smartphone, on iTunes or Stitcher. You can also subscribe on SoundCloud. And if you're a regular listener to the show, I'd really love a review. As always, I have everything discussed on today's show on my blog at digitaltraining.ie. I'm taking questions for my upcoming shows, so please submit your social media and digital marketing queries to me at digitaltraininginstitute.ie/askjsb. Don't be a social media stranger. You can find me across the social web, and I always love to hear from my listeners, and I also love your feedback. I am Joanne Sweeney Burke, and this is JSB Talks Digital. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.
JSB Talks Digital.